Welcome everyone to today's LeaderFactor webinar. We're excited to be with you. Tim, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks. Good to be here.
Good to be here.
This is a great webinar.
It is a great webinar. It feels like we're in the situation room right here. I've got, I don't know how many screens
Well,
and
we kind of are.
pages of notes.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your notes. You got 4 highlighter colors.
I do.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I don't know which is which, but it's going to be good.
I hope you do, because we got an hour in front of us
That's
to
right.
get through all of the notes. But we're grateful for all of you who are in attendance. We have people from all over the place. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my chat.
Yeah, share some of those, Junior. This is incredibly global, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every continent, pretty much.
British Columbia, Argentina, Alberta, Northern Ireland, Cambodia, Pakistan, New York City, Bangladesh,
Wow. That's pretty global.
Chile, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Ohio, Ontario, Canada, Barbados. Hey,
Wow.
probably warmer there than here, I'll tell you that. We're joining you from Utah, USA, York, Pennsylvania, Reston, Virginia. Excited to have all of you with us.
Yeah, thank you.
We know that you could spend your time doing a whole lot of different things in a whole lot of different places, and so we're grateful that you've given us a few minutes today. It's a great Friday, and we're off to a pretty good start.
Yep.
If you have attended a LeaderFactor webinar in the past, go ahead and put that in the chat. We would love to hear from you. And if you're a podcast subscriber, we would also love to hear from you. It's always good to see familiar names.
Yeah.
It's fun to see over the years how many repeat attendees we have in particularly the webinars.
It's a good sign.
So I'll be scrolling through the chat here and there, and I'm like, I've seen that name a few times. I've met many of you. I wish I could meet all of you. So we're going to start with a scenario today. And imagine that you are in the boardroom. It's a Q2 budget review, and the CFO's deck shows 3 years of margin compression and a heat map of all the cost centers. And procurement's there, IT's there, sales is there. They have hard numbers. They're looking at dollars saved, pipeline generated, churn reduced, and you represent L&D. And you have course completions, maybe a net promoter score. And as we see on the slide, the CFO's red pen hovers. So here's our question today. Could you stop that red pen with data that matters? That's today's topic, is measurable impact. So could you stop that red pen? If you had 60 seconds right now, I'd like for everyone to think about this, because the majority of the audience is learning and development.
Yeah.
What could you show that connects last quarter's leadership training to measurable business impact? That's the crux of the question today. And we're going to actually launch a poll that asks that question. Could you connect your last quarter's learning to a business metric today? So that poll should be up on your screen. Go ahead and respond to that. Yes or not yet. As those come in, we should probably do intros.
Yeah. Should we?
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm Junior. I'm the COO here at LeaderFactor. And one of my focuses is measurable impact. That's a lot of what. That's
true.
That's a lot of what.
Is that why we're doing this?
It's all for me.
Someone told you that we need to do that?
Yeah. And in front of me, I have Dr. Timothy Clark. He's an Oxford-trained social scientist. He's our founder and CEO, the author of many books. The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety is the one you're probably most familiar with.
Good to be here.
Okay, let's go ahead and close up that poll and see what our results are. Okay, we've got 32% yes and 68% not yet.
Okay.
Does that surprise you? Is that about what you expected?
No, it's actually a little bit more generous than what I expected. I didn't think that many could say yes, but still, it's about 1/3 to 2/3, right?
Yeah, almost
Roughly.
exactly.
Almost exactly.
So let's move to this next
Thus,
piece.
the topic of this webinar, Junior, measurable impact.
Measurable impact. So this slide's a little bit about who we are at LeaderFactor. We believe that the leader is the most important factor in any human outcome. And that may sound like a strong statement. We believe that very strongly. Why LeaderFactor?
That's true, Junior, because leadership is the most important applied discipline in the world. It's a factor in every decision. It's a factor in every outcome. No other applied discipline can make the same claim.
Yeah.
That's why.
So, Tim, paint the current battlefield for us. What's going on
Right.
in L&D? I know you wanted to take a few minutes and
Yeah.
set the stage tell us a little bit of what's going on, what's top of mind for you.
I do. I want to set the table a little bit around this topic. Why this topic? This topic is the holy grail topic for L&D. And let's all get in our time machine. We're going to go back to 1959, Junior. 66 years ago, Donald Kirkpatrick published his 4 levels model for training. 66 years ago.
Are you familiar with that, listeners? Put in the chat if you're familiar with this.
Everybody should be familiar with that model, right? It's 66 years old, 1959. And you remember the levels, right? It's reaction, learning, behavior, and then finally business impact. The reason that we're here today is because it's 66 years later, we are finally starting to realize that aspiration of being able to go to a level 4 measurement of business impact. We've been talking about it and we've bumped up against it here and there, but by and large, we have not been able to get there, Junior, for 66 years. We have not. And so I think what I want to say here is that we have finally entered the era of truly data-driven leadership development, talent development. We've never been there before, but welcome to that era because this is exactly where we're going. Everything is going to be data-driven.
It's been fun to listen to the chatter from our clients and internally our organization at LeaderFactor because it's very obvious to us being in this every single day, working with the organizations that we do, that we are in this new era and maybe we're right in the middle of this inflection point. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about that data throughout the conversation today. We're going to talk about Kirkpatrick's model and how we can achieve level 4.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on today and some of the things that we're seeing show up with our clients. We'll bring some data to this. So here's the organizational landscape, 3 things that we want to pay particular attention to. First is that skills gaps worry the C-suite. And we'll talk about CFO scrutiny and AI. But how about this? 50% of leaders doubt their teams can execute their new strategy.
50%.
50%.
Right.
And if any of you want the appendix to all of this at the end, we're happy to send that to you post-webinar. 50%. That's not a lot of confidence.
No, it's not.
You have leaders at very large influential organizations that are flipping a coin as to whether or not they think that their people have the skills to execute the strategy in front of them.
Well, the tough part about it is, Junior, they're confident in the strategy, but they're not confident in the human capital to execute the strategy. So that comes back to skill gaps.
Yeah. And that's where the tolerance for, it sounds a little trite, happy learners, but the tolerance for that as just the pure expectation is going down. If that's our criteria for success, we're not going to be able to defend budget. We're not going to be able to make the argument we need to make in order to do our job well, because the tolerance has gone down.
The scrutiny has gone up.
The scrutiny has gone up. CFO scrutiny has never been higher.
That's right.
Here's the measurement here. 65% of CFOs feel pressure to see ROI on every dollar inside learning and development, more pressure than they have historically. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's nice. We can show some of the data. We can show some of the studies, but it's also important that we relay that this is the pattern that we're seeing, boots on the ground, working with some of the biggest multinationals on planet Earth. We're seeing this every day. It's affecting those we partner with, and we're having to pay more attention to these types of things than we've had to in the past. The scrutiny, as you said, has gone up.
I think, Junior, historically, we have to acknowledge that L&D has been held to a different standard and a different level of scrutiny. And they have not been held to account for return on investment metrics that everybody else is typically and traditionally. But that is going away. That's what we're seeing with clients, right? That's going away. You have to hit the same standard, same hurdle rate for investments.
And part of the reason for that, or maybe the majority of the reason, has been access to data. So I want to throw that out there.
That's right.
That's why we're here. There's a reason for it. Yeah. There's a good reason for it.
Yep.
The reason that L&D has been held to a different standard, the accessibility of the data to prove ROI has not been there to the degree that you would need to make the case.
That's right.
What we're saying is that that's changing. And third, the AI divide is widening. 71% of L&D teams toy with AI personalization and content creation, yet most haven't connected learning data to business systems. So here's what we're seeing. On the content front, we're in 2025.
We are.
On the measurement front, we're in 1998. I think that that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You think that's
I think it's
fair?
a big gap. And Junior, here's another thing. And let's just look a little bit broader perspective to understand this. If you look at the evolution of the learning and development industry, you have measurement and assessment organizations over here. You have training organizations over here. They have evolved separately. Now, we also know that the industry is a cottage industry, by and large, highly fragmented, with very few organizations that get any scale, right? Because the barriers to scalability are formidable. So here you have assessment organizations growing up here, training organizations growing up here. What do organizations do? They take a little bit of this and a little bit of that. They don't talk to each other.
Pipelines aren't connected.
They don't talk to each other. One more thing. In research, we take concepts, we operationalize those concepts, and they become constructs. We go from concept to measurable construct. Well, what's the problem? You're relying on different organizations to measure versus the organizations that you're relying on to train. Of course, they don't talk to each other. So do you have accurate, measurable data based on what you're training on, based on the skill gaps that you have? No. So we see that's part of the problem. You have to understand the historical context.
Yep. I appreciate you calling that out. And that's part of what's changing in the infrastructure that we're talking about. The ability for those systems to talk to each other, the ability to integrate data pipelines in a way that's compelling.
Exactly.
It's all changing, and we're going to show that. So the next question I want to ask, we're going to launch a new poll. Which of these three is hitting your organization the hardest? So we've talked about skills gap, we've talked about budget scrutiny, and we've talked about measuring impact. So while you're responding to this poll and before we see results, we're going to get into the core problem, which is that research from Burson shows only 10% of companies can correlate people data to business metrics.
I have a comment on that too.
Yeah, please.
Sorry for all my comments.
Yeah.
I think that's an incredibly generous number. I personally don't think it's north of 5%. But okay, we'll go with 10.
Yeah.
But it's just 10. 90% are not doing it.
Yeah.
And that absolutely is true.
Yeah.
And it's been true for many years.
Anecdotally, experientially, it's true.
It's true.
And I would probably say south of 10 as well. Okay, let's close out this poll. Thanks everybody for your comments in the chat, by the way. Keep those coming. Okay, we've got skills gap at 24%, budget scrutiny at 32%, and measuring impact at 44%. So it looks like the primary concern is measuring impact.
There we go.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Because that's the title of today's webinar.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about.
That's why we're here.
If it would have been skills gap 100%, we would have been in trouble.
That's right.
I'm just kidding. Okay, let's go to the next one about a reframe. It's about business change, not learning metrics. What do you think about when you hear that? It's about business change, not learning metrics.
That means that we're focusing on the outcome. We're not focusing on inputs, we're focusing on outputs, right? But we've been focusing on inputs for years and years and years because we couldn't measure the outputs and we couldn't tie the inputs to the outputs.
If there's one reframe that I would share, it's stop trying to prove that learning happened.
Mm-hmm.
Start trying to prove that the business changed.
That's right.
I had a fascinating conversation with someone in L&D at a Fortune 500 just a couple of weeks ago when we had this very conversation. And he said, what I'm seeing, boots on the ground in my organization, big multinational, my burden is showing business impact. I've been reliant on showing that learning happened.
Right.
We had the event. We have participation metrics for you. We have some thumbs ups. but it's not.
We may
it's
even
not
have
enough.
some NPS scores.
Yeah,
okay.
which is great. And we
that's
should
great.
continue to do those things.
That's fantastic.
But that's the big reframe and shift that we need to make. So let's go over Kirkpatrick's model for everyone who's not familiar. So these are the 4 different levels. Level 1 is reaction, how people felt about the training. They're reacting to the experience itself.
This is smiley face.
This is smile sheets. Level 2, learning, what knowledge and skills did the participants gain? 3, behavior, what changed on the job? And 4, results, what moved in business outcomes.
Right.
I think it's important that we have an eye toward this. I think it's also interesting that it's that old. You said 66 years.
66. Yeah.
So this has been around a long time, yet where do we mostly live? Which is the next poll. Which level of Kirkpatrick's model does your organization currently measure consistently? So go ahead and respond to that. I'm interested to see what these look like.
Yeah, but think overall about your training and development function and about how you are evaluating. What are you doing?
Yeah, these are good comments. Anna, my issue with evaluating programs is that the trainings were already developed and then they say, hey, prove value on this, but don't even know why they were developed in the first place. It's so true.
That's a curriculum issue, right? It's so often we're driven. It's about programming. It's about developing a curriculum. It's about plug and play. It's about having topic areas covered. Right.
Okay. Let's close this poll. Let's see what our results are. Okay. Level 1 reaction, satisfaction scores and course completion is 48%. Level 2 learning, 30%. Level 3 behavior, 11%. And level 4 results, business outcomes and ROI, 12%. Okay. This is really interesting. And we're seeing these results for the first time as they're shown on the screen.
Yeah, that's quite the distribution right?
Yeah.
Well, it's 12%, and that's pretty close to Burson's number of 10.
Yeah, that's interesting, huh?
Yeah, very interesting. Pretty close.
Yeah, so 50, for all intents and purposes, 50%, we're at level 1.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. If you answered level 1, you got 50% of the people in this webinar.
We're very sympathetic because we understand why this has happened, where we are, what the evolution is, why we don't have measurable impact because we don't have the data. Right.
So here's how we're going to solve this problem. A 3-step system. If you're going to do 3 things in L&D, these are the 3 things that we believe you should do. These are the big buckets. These are the big rocks. If you can get these ones right, you're doing phenomenally.
That's right.
Assess, train, and prove. These are 3 of the 6 layers that we at LeaderFactor use when we partner with an organization. Some of the others have to do with infrastructure and definition and things of that nature. But these are the big ones. Assess, train, and prove. So if we're at level 1, or 50% of us are at level 1, then the majority of what's happening is half of one of those layers because it doesn't even yet become behavioral. And so it's happening in train. And we're doing the first half of train in this 3-part playbook of assess, train, and prove.
Right. Well, notice that assess precedes train. Right? Okay. And the vast majority of organizations are not doing that. They're not getting a baseline measure. They're not getting a T1 measure. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably worth calling out. And it's funny because it doesn't seem terribly novel because this is our approach. This is the way we work with organizations. But rare is the case that we'll engage with an organization broadly without T1 data.
Right.
We'll get into that. So let's talk about assessment for a second. Assessment's very important. You can't assess what you haven't defined. So that's where we have to start, is with definition. This is where it can be problematic inside a big organization that hasn't come to terms with the terms. They haven't defined what leadership means to their organization. They haven't defined what agile is. They haven't defined what emotional intelligence is. We need operable definitions that can scale through the organization in plain language. And if we can't make it that far, then the assessment is going to be off base because we're operating on different assumptions. So you have to level set up front about what it is we're talking about, and then we assess. Zero ambiguity and total alignment.
And we're doing that up front.
Yep.
That's the first thing that we're doing, right? We're clarifying terms. We're operationalizing definitions. And then if at all possible, we're using psychometric scales to measure and gain a baseline at the beginning.
Yep. And we'll show you how we do this piece of application in assessment, but just realize that the principles are universal. And so regardless of what your training topic is, regardless of what your 4 cultural pillars are, this is the methodology.
Yeah, regardless of what your competency model looks like, right? We've seen everything that under the sun.
Yep.
But this is the process that you need to follow.
So here's how we do it. We operate using what we call the core 15. 15 core skills, 5 skills each in the 3 domains. Those domains are lead self, lead the team, lead the organization. This is LeaderFactor's competency model. This is how we evaluate and train and prove leadership progress. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we do on the data side later that will be interesting to you. So stick around to the end. You'll have the opportunity to experience some of this. So without definition, without assessment, you can't measure learning, even level 2.
Right.
And you certainly can't evaluate level 3 behavior. So right here is where we shift from we kind of know what good looks like to we have a shared, testable, scalable standard throughout the organization. And I would love if you could speak to that for just a second, because some of the organizations that people are representing in the chat here are gargantuan.
Right.
How important is it to have a shared understanding and a shared metric when you're talking about an organization that's that large?
Well, you can't. It's impossible to measure. As you said, Junior, you just made a very good point. You're confined to a level 1 measurement, which is basically reaction, if you have not operationalized the definition of what you are trying to train on and ultimately improve. So you're stuck until you do that work up front, which is to define, we're going to clarify definitions, we're going to operationalize those definitions. Then we can measure at the beginning, T1, and then we can move into train, and then we can prove later, which you're going to talk about. So it all comes back to being able to clarify definitions, standardize those across the organization. There has to be a common language. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to demonstrate ROI down the road.
Yep. We have 2 goals in the assessment phase. Baseline with skill and behavioral assessments. They need to be behavioral. And this is something that we've also learned over time, all the way down to the scales that you're using. So we've become very opinionated about little details like this over time because we've seen what works and we've seen what doesn't. And so you'll notice the majority of our assessments operate on a 1 to 7 frequency scale. If you're using a 0 to 5 agreement or NPS, it's really difficult.
You can't measure behavior
to get the type of behavioral information that you want.
That's right.
Number 2, tie to outcome KPIs. This is the back half of the conversation that I was having with this colleague. So what do you do? How do you tie it in? And I asked him, what KPIs do you choose? And he said, I choose whatever KPIs my stakeholders care about. And I thought that was a beautiful definition because he said, I'm training throughout the organization.
Sure.
We're doing sales. We're doing client success. We're doing engineering. Sales cares about different outcomes than engineering does. Engineering cares about different outcomes than CS. So why would we be goaling revenue per FTE for engineering? Does it make sense? And most people aren't doing that, but you get the point.
Sure.
That it's important that we adopt whatever the KPIs are for that unit so that we can actually move the needle in the areas
to drive performance
that they
in
care
the
about.
Unit.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. So here are a couple examples. Psychological safety and safety incidents is a great one. So we've done a lot of work in
I love this one.
Heavy manufacturing. Explain the connection here.
The connection is For those of you who understand physical safety, you'll probably understand or know about the DuPont-Bradley curve, which means that in order to get to the safest possible work environment, you need a culture where every member of the organization is willing, Junior, to point out dangers, risks, and hazards on their own, right? And this goes back to the Toyota production system and people being willing to pull that and cord, even if they are the lowest on the hierarchy. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. So that connection between the psychological safety and the physical safety performance is unequivocal. It's very, very clear. So there's an example of a connection.
So to operationalize that, if we go into a manufacturing environment and that's one of their goals is decrease incident rate, then we might adopt that as a metric, as a KPI. Say we're going to connect psychological safety and incident rate. So we'll take T1 data of psychological safety using our PS index instrument, then we'll do intervention, and then we'll do T2. And we'll try to correlate the data. And so, okay, what was incident rate at T1 with our PS index data? Then we have intervention. What was incident rate post-intervention with T2 data?
Exactly.
If you can do that, you prove impact very clearly.
Very clearly.
And some of these are more difficult than others, but there's almost always data that exists.
That's right. And so, Junior, when you see that kind of correlation and there are no other lurking or mediating or confounding variables, then we know there's causation.
Yep. Okay. So we're moving from who enjoyed the workshop to who has the skills. That's the question we're asking with assess. Next, we're going to move into train and keep these comments coming. Nancy, DuPont-Bradley curve. Okay. Train, design targeted interventions, not generic training catalogs. This is only possible if we do the first step right. If we don't do the first step right, we can't do targeted intervention.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about this because I look at resource allocation and training in an organization, and a lot of it's shotgun. It's spray and pray. And we're going to give the same thing to everybody, and we're hoping that the needle moves.
Right.
But as I said before, sales is different than engineering. Team X is different than Team Y. Geography 1 is different from Geography 2. We'll run assessments based on some of the skills in Core 15, and you look at the variance by demographic.
Yeah.
If you're looking at geography or tenure or seniority or any number of variables, you'll see that it's not smooth across.
No, not at all.
The variance goes like this.
Yeah.
So as a leader, as an allocator of resource, why would I allocate the same resource in the same way across the entire playing field when there's such unique need when at the level that we're actually doing the training?
That's right.
So we have to be more insightful than that. We have to be a little bit more sophisticated than that. And the data allows us to do that. So if we see that a certain geography is lagging in a certain indicator, let's tune the intervention to treat that specifically. Let's do something different in this area of the organization. And that may go so far as topical differences. You're going to treat different issues. Maybe psychological safety is high need over here. But you got an organization of 20,000. You're going to put them all through the same thing for the same reason? No, probably not.
Well, you may look at another area, and change management is an acute need based on their priorities, based on what they have in front of them. Yep. I would also say, Junior, that we also have to acknowledge that there are some fundamental building blocks that we want to put in place, right, that an organization does.
Sure.
But as we've looked at data, as we've been swimming through data, we see incredible what we call local variance. Yeah. At the team level, functional level, geographical level, all the different levels. And so we understand that we've got to fine tune and create a targeted intervention.
Yep. And even for enterprise-wide programs, let's say that you want to cover a specific topic, segment by role.
Yeah.
The relevance of a given topic to a senior leader is going to be different from an individual contributor who's been there for 6 months.
That's right.
That difference is appreciable. We have to look at that and say, okay, we're going to change our approach. And if I go back in the slides to this list of core 15, traditionally, the training selection will be made subjectively and based on anecdote. And we'll say, well, I think this piece of the organization needs coaching.
Yeah.
And I heard from Joe and Susan that over there, they need vision.
Yeah. We could talk about that for a long time. Yeah.
And so I want to go back to that assessment point just for a second, because you can be clinical. You can be very specific in the way you approach this. And it's always going to be defensible if it's based on data. Right. So if someone asks you the question, well, why are they getting this training, or why are we doing it this way? This is what the data said, right? This is what the data showed us, and we're responding to the data, not anecdote.
Just as a reflection question, I would invite, Junior, all the listeners and viewers out there to ask themselves this question: to what extent or when do you use anecdotal or impressionistic evidence to drive decisions about L&D, to drive curriculum decisions, to drive priorities, to drive the allocation of resources? We see around us with great frequency that this happens a lot. So I would just think about that, reflect on that, and ask yourself, can we start using data better to identify skill gaps?
Yep.
Right.
Targeted interventions.
Targeted. And
we do that across self, team, and organization. Those three domains are different from each other. Right?
They're very.
They
do bleed into each other, and they're overlapping. We get it.
Yeah.
But the fundamental thrust and focus and orientation of each of those is quite different.
Well, you'll notice that's why we segment the 15 skills by domain. It's not 15 skills for everyone in every role to the same degree.
Right.
The fundamental requirements of our roles vary as we move from self, team, to organization, and thus we've organized the skills that way. I'm noticing some comments in the chat about how do you get the data? That's what we're getting to.
We're getting to.
So hang in there. We're going to talk about getting the data. We're going to help you get the data. So the question here, can you repeat the concept? We're axing that, and we're saying, can you apply the skill? Of course, you need to be able to repeat the concept. The didactic piece of the learning will probably be there forever, but application is where it really starts to get different.
Junior, I want to make a comment on that. So in the world of learning and development in organizations, everything has to be converted into a tool, a behavior, or a skill. So there's always conversion. There has to be conversion. So every skill area becomes an applied discipline. So concepts are nice, but as I said earlier, they have to become constructs.
Yeah.
And then they move into applied disciplines translated into tools, behaviors, and skills. That has to be the case every time, right? That's the requirement. That's the threshold requirement for every skill area.
There are a couple comments in the chat that I really like and questions. This one's from Shauna. How can we isolate the ROI of training programs when other interventions are also implemented to address the business problem? We're going to talk about lurking variables in this next section, which is prove.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple things that we want in here. We want longitudinal dashboards. We want to be able to speak the CFO's language, and we want to treat every cohort as an A/B test. And we'll get into each one of those. Let's go into Kirkpatrick's one more time. Reaction, learning, behavior, and results. Prove is about results. It's getting all the way to level 4, what moved in business outcomes. So here's one of the things that I love. If you have nothing else, you have access to no data outside of what you're gathering specifically in L&D. Look for skill percentile improvement. If we just isolate at the level of the skill, if we're not assessing, we can't do that. And if we're not assessing before the intervention,
you
also can't do that.
Right.
So that's why the sequence is so important. So let's say that you have nothing else and you have this training. What I would do in an afternoon, create an assessment for that particular thing so that you can gather some data that shows it's a behavioral assessment based on frequency.
Got to be behavioral.
If you have that, let that serve as your T1 data. Then do your intervention. Then at a time appropriate, depending on what your topic is or what your desired outcomes are, take T2 data, run the same thing, see if you've been able to move the needle.
Right.
You don't need data pipelines from outside your particular space necessarily. Now, we want them and we'll talk about them, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, that's true. Junior, it's interesting because this methodology is not new.
Yeah.
But it's our ability to acquire the data and get longitudinal data that is evolving very quickly based on the tools that we have. But in research, we call this a pre-post test experimental design. Measure at the beginning, have your intervention, measure again at the end, and then demonstrate measurable impact over time. So this goes back to the scientific method, but we've lacked the tools and we haven't had organizations that can speak to each other. Yeah. And so here we are.
Yep. The ability to go gather data, to assimilate the data, to synthesize the data, that is getting commoditized day by day. So part of the inflection point that we're experiencing with our clients is the cost of data. Cost of data is going down. The data exists. It's a matter of going out there, getting it and connecting it. And that's one of the most difficult things to do. If you have revenue per FTE, retention rates, time to productivity, CSAT, you should be tracking variables like that in concert with the L&D variables that you're measuring.
That's right.
The skill development itself. If you have access to that and you're not using it, that's step one. Go have conversations with the people that you need to have conversations with to see if you can get aggregate, anonymized, whatever type of data you can get, try to get that.
Yeah.
One of the most impactful things that we did with a client a while back was get access to their performance data while running 360s. We were able to get all of the 360 results and take that multi-rater feedback and compare it against the broad performance data of the same population that was gathered through other means. And guess what we found? Almost perfectly correlated. Mm-hmm. That allows us to be just razor sharp in intervention and know exactly what's going on with the organization. You think about succession planning, you think about all of the things affected by those choices, it's amazing. And so just simply connecting those things gave credence to our entire approach because we were able to show how tightly those two things tracked, which was psychological safety data, in this case, with their performance metrics internally.
That's right.
Okay. So if you have the data, package the story the way finance packages cost avoidance projects. Payback period, net benefit, and IRR.
This is the standard.
It's a standard.
That everybody else is held to.
So it's true.
Right?
So I'll walk through a real example. So you're sitting across from your CFO, maybe the one that was holding that red pen. And she's got your budget proposal with a question mark next to manager training for $100,000. You show one slide, 3 bars showing turnover rates. Trained teams dropped from 18% to 12%. Untrained teams still at 18%. She asks you, what's that worth? You probably would be able to get the data to say is $300,000 in avoided replacement costs. So $200,000 net after training.
Wow.
Right? Many of you have access to that data. Not everyone has access to that data, but we're not connecting it.
Yeah.
And so she circles your line item, but it's green instead of red. How about that?
And she says, we can increase your budget.
Yeah. And she says, can we scale this? But really though, that's the conversation that we often have is when we can prove that we've been able to make an impact in the KPIs that matter to them.
That's right.
That scale is the next question. Yeah. How do we increase the impact? Because if you can scale that $200,000 net, great, 10x it. There's a couple more $1 million to the budget. Okay, what about lurking variables? Couple things. Use control groups if you can. Mm-hmm. Pilot, non-pilot. This is one of the easiest ways to do it. So if you're going to assess, let's say that you're in early stages, you're trying to prove out a certain course, a certain methodology. You take pre-post in the population that you're working with, but you have to have a control. If you don't have control data, it's much more difficult to make your case.
Right.
And so take pre-post with a population that did no intervention and compare them.
Mhm.
If you can show, hey, this group's a standard deviation above the control, great. You got to approach it like a scientist.
You do.
Another thing that we had a couple slides back was treat every cohort as an A/B test. Run learning and development like product. Iterate. This is one thing that kills me. That there have been interventions that were running the same way for 50 years.
Yeah.
And some of that's okay. There are universal principles.
Yeah.
And some of that is well and good. But the opportunity to improve is unbelievable. You know how often we change our courses? Do you know how often we change just little teeny things based on the data?
When do we not, Junior?
It's constant.
It's constant.
It's constant.
Yeah, it's constant.
The core principles remain the same.
Yeah.
We want to transfer the same knowledge. We want the same behavioral outcomes. If we see a better way, a shorter path from A to B, we're going to take that. If there's an opportunity in technology, like I think about coaching, right?
Mhm.
Our coaching course. If we hadn't introduced AI into that course as the meta coach to coach the coach, how much less valuable would that course be?
Oh, it's incredible.
If we hadn't put the newest version of change.
Yeah. Well, Junior, I was just training Epic Change yesterday. We did a public workshop
literally yesterday.
And everyone builds a change roadmap for an actual change initiative. And the AI coach integration now is incredible.
Yeah.
Because it understands the methodology, it understands the tools. It's just an example of how the marginal value that we've gained from that.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And this happens every week, it seems like.
Yeah. No, really. Because you look at how fast the toolkit is changing.
Yeah.
If that's not your cadence, you're behind.
Our product development cycle is, it's weekly.
Well, it's to the degree that sometimes you're like, I don't know if it's a good idea to sleep ever.
I know.
Because you wake up the next morning and it's like, well,
what do we do?
You know, Gemini 3 is here this morning and this is what it's doing.
That's right. What are we going to do?
What do we got to do? So all that to say, we have to be very intentional. We have to be agile. We have to be scientific about the way that we approach these things. And even without perfect science, if you see a positive trend post-training and you can reasonably rule out major external causes, you're on the right track.
That's right.
And that's so much more than we see many people doing.
You're not going to be able to achieve laboratory conditions.
Yeah.
Right? You're out in the wild, but you conduct the experiments the best that you can. You try to control for those lurking, mediating, confounding variables the best that you can.
Yep.
And generally, and most of the time, you're going to get it right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're running pilots and you're doing A/B testing.
Yep. Okay. That is the prove step. That's level 4 of Kirkpatrick's model, connecting leadership investments directly to business outcomes. Next, you're probably thinking, or many of you may be saying, this makes sense, but I don't have baseline data. I can't start. I don't have the data I need. Here's how we're going to solve that. Remember, there are 3 steps: assess, train, and prove. We're going to solve for step 1 with a brand new assessment called LeaderFactor Index. Our team has been building this for quite some time, and we're excited to share what we've been working on with you. LeaderFactor Index is coming 2026. If you made me bet today, I would say midway through January. So hold me to it. Midway through January, this is going to be available.
26.
Early 26.
Very early.
It's an instrument that measures all Core 15 leadership skills at an individual and a group level. And this consolidates everything that we've built over the last decade. Many of you know us for our instruments, our assessments, PS Index, EQ Index, our multi-rater stuff. We have so many assessments here at LeaderFactor, and this consolidates all of that experience into a single assessment to give you baseline data. So an organization understands exactly where its leaders are, individually, as cohorts, by demographic, so that you can surgically prescribe intervention. so that you can lift the scores because you have the data, you know what the interventions are going to look like, and you can see longitudinally the effects of that training.
Exactly.
What do you think about this?
It's incredible. This is the holy grail. This is what we've been this is the aspiration we've been trying to realize, Junior, since 1959. We have made progress in as you said, in different areas, in different skill areas. We've been doing this.
Yep.
But we haven't been able to put it together as an integrated whole until now across the 3 domains of lead self, lead the team, lead the organization until now.
Yep.
So this is incredibly exciting.
Yep.
But we have the technology and we have the conceptual framework, we have the concepts and the constructs, and we're ready to go.
And at this point, you're probably expecting me to sell it to you. This is the perfect build up into the sales pitch.
This is the good news.
The good news is that it's free for you because you're on this webinar today. So we're offering complimentary access to everyone who's here today, and we'll figure out exactly how long we leave that up, TBD.
Yeah.
But you will have the opportunity to join the waitlist today for first access into LF Index. LeaderFactor Index is going to measure, as we said before, across the 3 domains: lead self, lead the team, lead the organization, all 5 skills inside each one of those domains. This is what you're going to get: individual assessment and report for you specifically, the ability to do group diagnostics. We can run aggregate reports so that you can see a specific cohort, a specific geography, a specific department, a group of leaders, a hypo group, skill percentile scores across the core 15. The data that we're going to gather here will allow you to benchmark in a way that you haven't been able to in the past. So not only will you have your internal data and be able to benchmark that against itself, but you'll be able to benchmark externally by industry, geography, the way that we have all of the benchmarks set up in PS Index and EQ Index and those instruments that you're familiar with already. We've built the largest normative database of psychological safety in the world. We have tons and tons of data. I see a world where we have equivalent volume, much more, most likely.
Yeah, even more.
Across core 15.
That's right.
That's incredibly exciting to me.
Yeah.
We have been banging away on this product for quite some time. And the tooling, I think you're going to be very impressed by. So here are some mocks from the dashboard. These are more than mocks. The dashboard exists. The plumbing is working. The data is starting. We're getting some. The instruments are being validated. Everything in there is going to be amazing. This is probably the most excited at LeaderFactor I have been in a decade.
Yeah,
and I've been pretty excited the whole time.
I think you said, Junior, that this is one of those kind of one in a decade moments.
I believe it to be.
Yeah.
I believe it to be. So you'll have access to this. We'll put links in the chat, and I'm assuming that it'll probably be emailed to you as well. You'll probably see it. It'll probably be hard to miss. I'm sure we're going to hit you from 5 or 6 different angles with access to this. Here's how the timeline's going to work. We're aggregating anonymized data from early adopters, and we're going to share all of that benchmark data and make that available in Q1 of next year. The assessment's going to go live in January, and we'll have a Q1 benchmark webinar. Global. The next webinar, the next time you see us in this format, we're going to be going through that with you and showing you what the data says. That's exciting.
I can't wait.
Across all core 15 skills, you'll be able to see globally what's happening. And that'll tell us, okay, what are the patterns?
Yeah.
What's happening? What effect is this macro level environment having in our ability to do leadership well? Which skills seem to be most in demand? Which are the least developed relative to that demand? And we'll be able to do really, really cool things. So please join the waitlist of LF Index. To wrap up, before we hit Q&A, we'll do about 10 minutes of Q&A. So we've been aggregating questions this whole time. Assess, train, and prove. Assess, train, and prove. Those are the 3 steps that if you can do them well, you'll be successful in learning and development. But you have to do those three, and you have to do them in that order. Our goal is to help you do all three steps. That's why we're here. That's why LeaderFactor as an institution exists. We love leadership. It's our life's work. It's what we dedicate our time to, is helping organizations build leaders. And to the eye, or with an eye to the individual, help the individual understand these concepts, embody them, put them into practice. The greatest feedback we ever get is that this is professionally useful and personally useful. There's nothing more gratifying to me as someone who builds product than to have someone come back and say, hey, this really helped me. It's really helped me in the way that I'm engaging with my friends and my family, and this is what it's doing to my life. That's what we're after. The professional impact of all of these things done at a personal level is unbelievable.
Yeah.
We've seen it time and time and time again. We've been doing this for a long time.
Junior, it reminds me of the statement that Warren Bennis made years ago. He said, the development of a leader is no different than the development of an integrated human being. They are one and the same process. And I've always loved that. I've always remembered that.
I love it too. Okay, we're going to roll out LF Index invites in phases in the order of the wait list. So the higher up you are in that wait list, the sooner you'll get the assessment. So use the link in the chat to secure your spot. Okay, that's it for the main content of the webinar. We're going to get into some Q&A.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. From Nancy, what are your recommendations for gathering T2 data on a leadership program for a large organization where outcomes may be difficult to capture? I see the value of targeting specific areas of the organization, but with how learning is typically set up, what are your recommendations? For example, 28 leaders go through a leadership development program every year. It's a small N for a large organization.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, you should be able to get level 3 data on behavior pretty easily if you create an instrument that maps to the training and you are using response scales for frequency, right, Junior? Okay, so the level 3 is not going to be that hard. You tailor it to whatever your curriculum is for that cohort. Level 4 is going to be a bigger challenge. It depends on, do these people work in the same function, in the same geography? Are they spread out? Because if they're all totally spread out, I wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to find and just focus on one or two critical KPIs or business metrics that you that you build in from the beginning, and you get a baseline measure before, like when you measure T1, and then you measure again after the training. But you got to find one or two.
And I would also add that the breadth of the KPI should be considered against the N. So if you have low N, then you have to choose a very local KPI.
You do.
And let's say it's a hypo group and those 28 are spread throughout the organization. You've got to choose something local to those people.
You have to.
And if you don't, then it's going to get muddled really easily.
That's true.
How do I get my leadership to buy into measurement? They see it as extra work.
Ooh.
Quick win. One program, one metric, that KPI that the organization already cares about, pre and post.
There you go.
If you have that, no one is going to be...
Start small.
No one is going to be mad.
It doesn't create a lot of pain.
No. And these instruments can be really, really short.
Yeah.
So if you look at PS Index, it's
12 items.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes. Yeah.
So the ones who say, well, survey fatigue. It's like, do you want the data? It takes 5 minutes. So if you want the outcome, then that's how it goes.
By the way, if you are experiencing survey fatigue, I would question the instruments that you are using.
Yeah.
Most psychometric instruments, meaning that they have been tested for reliability and validity, are short. Because scales typically are 3 to 5 items per construct or subconstruct. Yeah. So when we have these long instruments, like I see organizations, they have these engagement surveys that go on and they keep adding items. That's not going to do anything for you, right? Especially when you aggregate the data and you're looking at it holistically. that's not going to be actionable data.
Yep.
Based on aggregating the data and also just the size of that instrument. But we see that over and over again. It's not helpful.
Yep. Okay, what if we measure and find no improvement? That's valuable data.
Yeah.
That's some of the most valuable data because it tells you something about the population or the intervention.
That's right.
And you can dive into that. But if you did that 3 times and your T2 data isn't moving, then you know that there's something wrong with the intervention.
That's right.
And you have to go back and say, okay, well, the variable that I'm trying to pull, the lever that I'm working with is not connecting to the backside of the data. Then you've got to change that lever. Something in the ingredient list has to change.
Junior, I would just say on that issue, there are many organizations that have curriculum offerings that have been around for a long time. And they are entrenched, they fossilized, they calcified into the organization, and they just say, this is what we do in this area. But turns out those training offerings are really not doing the job. They could be old didactic offerings, and those need to be questioned. They need to be scrutinized with fresh eyes.
Yep. Agreed.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, we've got time for 2 or 3 more. So if you want yours in, please send it. I implemented a system to show metrics and data was wrong. How do I regain credibility when wanting to implement a new system? Great question. And thank you for the question. Thank you for the honest question.
Yes.
I would say be explicit about your assumptions on the front end. That's one of the most important things that you can do when you're doing something like this. If there's a lurking variable, or you sense that there's something else going on, or you sense that the data might not be quite right, or something's a little bit askew, list that out explicitly in your assumptions.
That's right.
Because then you'll be able to point to those. If something doesn't turn out the way that you expect it to, then you can go back and look at those assumptions. And to the stakeholder, that's very reasonable to see, okay, they made this, and this assumption. This assumption was wrong. So we've isolated the issue. Now, moving forward, let's go. So I would say be scientific. Be methodical.
More scientific. Be explicit about those assumptions. I couldn't agree with you more, Junior. That's exactly what you've got to do.
Yep. From Greg, what about mindset in addition to behavior? Maybe impossible to measure. Does defining and operationalizing assist? Yes, mindset matters.
Yeah.
Mindset is borne out in behavior.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't hide that forever. And so if we look at your behavior, we can infer your mindset. And that's
right. We always work backwards from behavior because the behavior is symptomatic.
Yep. So a practical example, emotional intelligence, one of our courses. There are 3 sub-skills inside of emotional intelligence. One of them is regard. We measure regard. What do I believe about other people? That's something that you might say, well, how do you measure regard? Regard is measured in its behavioral application, the way that you treat other people in front of you. And then you see that in multi-rater. That's another way you can get at mindset.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Is if you're looking just at self-respondent data, it might be led astray.
Yeah, that's true. In multi-rater feedback data, you're able to surface measures of mindset.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we have to go to behavior because over the long haul, that's where the reliable data are.
Yep.
Right.
Last one. Servant leadership is the latest thing around here. Would it be easy to map Core 15 across to the associated characteristics? 100%.
100%.
Yeah, you can take almost any competency model and map it. So if there's something specific that you care about, it's going to be covered in the Core 15 in one or more spots, almost guaranteed. Core 15 is the result of how much work?
Well, let's take a look at that. So if you go back to Robert Greenleaf's work on servant leadership, okay, that gets translated though into skill areas. And so depending on the way you're operationalizing servant leadership, you've come up with your conception of that and the skills that reflect that.
Yep.
That's all measurable.
Yep. It's all measurable.
And it can all map to core 15.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, everybody, we're at the top of the hour, 10 a.m. on the dot Mountain. So wherever you are, we know that it's very late for some, very early for others. So regardless of where you're joining, thank you for being here. Yeah. We appreciate your time and we appreciate what you do in the world. We have a privilege to work with some of the best people in the world.
No question.
You are all numbered among them. You wouldn't be joining a webinar like this if you weren't interested in improving the human condition and helping those around you become better. So for all of you out there for whom that is your life's work, thank you. It is ours as well. We aspire to be useful to you and your organization. So if there's a way that we can help, don't hesitate to reach out. And our last invitation, take LF Index as soon as it comes out. Join the waitlist in the meantime, and we will join you in a Q1 webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you.
See you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.